Hello Summoners and welcome back to another Pro Guides video. My name is Nathan Ng and we're going to be going over the beginner's guide to support for Season 12. Despite the name, this isn't a guide for just new players. Maybe you need to catch up after a preseason break, or you just want to make sure that you have all the basics down so you can go ahead and get your season off to a good start. Wherever you stand, you're guaranteed to learn something from this video. Also, before we get started, I do want to just take a minute to tell you about ProGuides.com. We have courses from all your favorite streamers and pros to really help you understand how to play the right way. And if you want a more personalized experience, we have coaches available 24/7, ready to help you guys become the best. Our coaches are top-tier players that have spent years climbing the solo queue ladder to get where they are now, and they're ready to share everything that they've learned with you. The new season is just around the corner, so if you're really serious about making Season 12 the season that you finally reach your goals, then you should really consider heading over to our site. The link for that is down in the description box below. Now, let's get started. So, the first thing that we need to look at is what's new this season, and how those things may affect you as a support. Since the preseason is the downtime where ranked games don't matter nearly as much as the rest of the year, it's the time where Riot plans to implement all their new crazy ideas and systems to the game. For example, last year they brought us the new item system revamp, which was a huge change. Not only did Riot remove and rework a lot of the old items while adding in some new ones, but they also introduced the new Mythic class. This year, the biggest change that we saw was the addition of the new Chemtech and Hextech dragons. These changes aren't the type to directly affect the meta in any way, since dragon spawns are purely RNG, but they still definitely spice things up a little bit. The Hextech dragon in particular allows for some interesting plays. When that dragon is chosen to be Dragon Soul, the Elemental Rift gives Hex gates that will allow you to traverse the map. This can be used to make it from one side of the map's blue buff right behind the other side's red buff. While pretty niche, this does open up some unique playmaking situations. For example, if you're some type of engaged support like Alistar, this gives you a way to flank the enemy team. This is especially useful when you don't have flash up on a champion that otherwise basically has to have it up to be useful. Another instance that you can use these gates is when you want to get deep vision in the enemy jungle quickly. You can go between the jungles much quicker than normal, but have to be careful about taking those gates blindly. It can very easily lead to a quick trip back to the fountain. When the Chemtech Dragon's Rift is up, you have to push out for vision lines further than normal. For example, a ward at the enemy red buff won't see an opponent crossing from raptors to golems. You'll need to ward deeper at the edge of the Chemtech fog. The second big change is the addition of some new items, as well as a rework of some existing ones. In case you're totally new to these changes, the most broken thing that we've seen by far this preseason is Crown of the Shattered Queen. It provides so much safety for mages that they are by far the strongest class of champions in the current meta. Most supports won't be building this item, though it could be a good pickup if you enjoy some off-meta picks, particularly mages with some engaged potential like Nico or Vex. But one item that you should be building is Even Shroud. Prior to this preseason, tanks were pretty much hard locked into going for Locket of the Iron Solari. And don't get me wrong, Locket is a good item, but being forced into an item that is obviously tailored towards being defensive can feel bad when you're trying to snowball hard in the bot lane with somebody like Leona or Maokai. The only other option that some aggressive supports went was with Shurelius, but this would leave you very squishy. But now we have this new shiny new toy to play with. Even Shroud is basically the new mythic version of Zeke's. Like Locket, the item gives plenty of tanky stats, but instead of having a defensive active, it gives a damage amplifying passive. And one thing that's really easy to overlook is that damage amp applies to all champions within 600 units of any champions that you CC, or that's CCing you. 600 units is fairly big, so you're likely going to be providing the damage amp to nearly every single enemy in the team fight. Even after the numbers were nerfed from 12% down to 9, that's a huge boost to your teammates' damage output. So unless you really need that team-wide shield from Locket against a really big AoE threat like Karthus or Vladimir, really consider going for this more aggressive option. Before we get into our support basics, I have a question for you bot lane enthusiasts. What's your favorite bot lane duo? For me, my classic favorite bot lane has always been Caitlyn and Zyra. The pair have extremely good range and a lot of poke, but also have the tools to easily deal with any all-in attempts from enemy kill lanes. As long as there isn't a huge jungle diff, it's just unbeatable. Let us know your favorite pair in the comments down below, and let's get back on topic. Okay, so now that we got what's new out of the way, let's talk about some support basics. Some of you more experienced players may think that you don't really need to hear what I have to say here, but even players in the upper elos get sloppy and start to lack in this department. Solid fundamentals are just as important, if not more important, than having good mechanics. That statement is more true for some supports than any other role, since it's the role that has the most macro impact in the game. If you aren't actively playing the map right away, you're playing into the stereotype that support players just get carried every single game. No matter what role you're playing, the first basic skill that you'll need is probably getting used to developing a game plan in the early game. This requires a lot of experience, since you have to understand how your matchup is going to play out and how the junglers can affect that. Plus, we're talking about the bot lane here. Since it's a 2v2 lane, the matchup is a lot more complex. Then you have to take your lane partner into account. Different players have different preferences, even in identical matchups. For example, I would always rather play to shove in my opponents if I'm playing in a lane with Caitlyn. That way we can chip away at both our opponents and their turret. But I met Kates that just want to freeze near our turret and try to punish the enemy ADC harder when they're just trying to farm. It may not build as much of a lead as that first way, but it's definitely much safer. Either way, regardless of what is better, the first step is being on the same page with your ADC. If they want to hold the freeze near your tower, don't just constantly force trades that mess that up. If they want to shove in waves, don't randomly go for roams. Roaming can be a great way to help your jungle and mid lane when done right, but when done poorly, you just leave your ADC in an awkward position where they're just forced to overextend and risk dying for farm, or they just give up all that gold and XP. The next thing to talk about is understanding that in most cases, supports dictate the pace of the bot lane. Marksmen may be the damage dealers, but unless it's somebody with an extreme range advantage, your ADC isn't going to be able to do much on their own. As a support, you should be constantly looking to pressure the enemy bot lane. As an engage or hooks champion, posture so that your opponents feel like you're looking to go in. As an enchanter, you should constantly be looking for safe trades on your foes. I'm not saying to run through the minions and just go for an all-in. Just weave in and out to land some poke. If you move up to use Janna's W every single time their ADC is about to go for a last hit, they have to decide between giving up some CS or taking some free damage. Either way, you're racking up small wins which add up in the long run. Another big part about running bot lane is controlling the lane bushes. You may not consciously think about it, but when one support forces the other one out of the lane bushes, that's usually the bot lane that runs the show for the next few minutes. That's because controlling those bushes play into our last point a lot. If there's a Leona sitting in a bush, the enemy ADC is afraid to ever want to be close to that bush, since they never know when she's trying to go in for a fight. Ring champions get to freely send out their poke from bushes without their opponents getting that much of a chance to retaliate. So far, we've been talking about how to control the laning phase, but what if you end up in a bad matchup where the enemy jungler just hard camps and there's nothing that you can do? There are two general options. The first is losing gracefully, which means accepting that your ADC will be down a little bit of CS and you just hug the turret and hope to scale, which is totally fine if you're already picking a hyper-scaling support like Zilean or Yuumi. But if you see the enemy bot lane pick something practically unbeatable like Caitlyn and Morgana, instead of picking up to scale, I like to go with the other option. I just abandon the bot lane altogether and play for the rest of the map. The number one pick for this is, of course, Bard. He is the king of roaming supports and can even gank for first blood in the mid lane at level 1. I'm speaking from experience and Master Plus gameplay for that one. Bard isn't the only champion capable of this. Even enchanters can move around the map and build leads elsewhere. Just know that if you're gonna roam, you just want to rush boots of mobility as fast as possible so you can go ahead and get around quickly. Your ADC is definitely going to be behind in CS, but if that was already going to be the case, you may as well just shift your efforts elsewhere, right? You can very easily apply pressure on your own, and even if you don't net a kill, just running in and landing some hits will help push the enemy mid laner out of lane. But for some even better results, try to coordinate your ganks with your jungler. Dying to a 3-man gank is a really tilting experience for mid laners, and we all know psychological warfare is a real way to win in solo queue. Next up, let's look at a few post-lane tips for support. The first is keeping good vision. This may seem like it could be a given, but even in higher elos, I see supports with little to no good vision control. What makes vision good? Well, our wards need to actually cover meaningful areas. If the dragon is coming up in 30 seconds, you probably don't need to put 3 green wards and a control ward around Baron. Instead, ward out the enemy jungle around dragon and just use the control ward to deny your opponent's vision in the river. If objectives aren't going to be a thing for a bit, you should just be getting wards in key locations in the enemy jungle. It's much better to have 3 wards that are spread out rather than having 3 wards that are all within a screen distance of each other. You don't really need to see that enemy jungler walk from wolves to blue to gromp with 100% vision coverage of their path. It would be a lot more useful to have 1 ward at the entrance of the wolves, 1 ward either at the blue buff's bush or the ramp right next to it, and then 1 ward near the enemy raptors. This setup gives a lot of good general information and should allow your team to track the enemy team at any point. The next tip is knowing your role in team fights. This is a concept that applies to all roles, but since support is largely responsible for enabling your team, it's really important that you get this one down. Some games, this is so easy, and you can turn off your brain. Let's say that you're playing Leona. In 90% of the games, the best play is just to CC the enemy, ADC, or mid laner, and just keep them locked up as long as possible to stop them from doing any damage and allow your team to easily bring them down. But what if the enemy team has a diver like Camille or Darius ghosting to run down your ADC? Despite being labeled as a quote-unquote engage support, it's really important to know that you need to play peel and protect. This concept is what makes champions like Thresh such a high skill cap champion to play, and is why so many skilled one-tricks are able to climb with him no matter what meta it is. You can play to catch, peel, protect, disrupt, or just lantern out a carry, if they pick up the lantern. Another aspect of knowing your role in fights is knowing when you need to save cooldowns for certain things. For example, if you're playing Soraka, rather than just using E randomly to deal damage to an enemy, you'll likely want to save to interrupt super deadly abilities like Katarina or Fiddlesticks ultimates. The last tip I'll be giving you for support is knowing that your health is a resource. Obviously, tank support players should always be frontlining and in most cases are the first one to die in a team fight. But enchanter supports are almost seen way at the back of a team fight, scared for their lives. I get that you're squishy and you just need to be a little bit cautious, but if you're making it all the way to the end of a team fight with full HP and your ADC is dead, odds are you played the fight poorly. This obviously isn't talking about the times your ADC flashes into their death, you can't really help that. But when your ADC has ults, flashes, and the kitchen sink thrown at them in a team fight, it's your job to try to keep them alive so they can carry. Maybe this means blocking an Ash Arrow, or Flash Blitz Hook, or just standing on top of them to try and eat a few auto attacks. Either way, learn to move up and actively take hits or even die for your carries. It's a thankless job. Anyway, that wraps up our beginner's guide to support for Season 12. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, be sure you sub so you never miss out on content like this. Remember, let us know what your favorite bot lane duo is down in the comments below. And one last thing, don't forget to check out our Discord in the description box below, where you can go ahead and discuss League further or just hang out and be a part of the community. I can't wait to see you guys back in the next video, but until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. Peace.